what's good, baby?
Young nigga treating getting bread like some type of sport. I told the dumb bitch I need head, don't fight the force. I said what I said is what I said, don't go back and forth. The devil in my head, I need meds or some type of source. Young nigga treating getting bread like some type of sport. I told the dumb bitch I need head, don't fight the force. I said what I said is what I said, don't go back and forth. The devil in my head, I need meds or some type of source. I told the dumb bitch I need head, don't fight the force. You a no name, a small fry or some type of dork. I remember fresh about the pain and all black forces. Bitch, why even asking for some dick? You can't afford it. Fat bitch said she got a loaf, then I'm Norby. He tryna run a perk out, but I don't talk to informants. I had his baby mama bathe me, then rub me in jergens. Bitches wanna pay me so she can hug me in person. Bitches had some payments when you come to my sermons. Think about they niggas that's finna die, like was it worth it? She gon' give me her money and some head with a purpose. I'm the truth, I can't fuck with a broke bitch, I'm allergic. Young nigga treating getting bread like some type of sport. I told the dumb bitch I need head, don't fight the force. I said what I said is what I said, don't go back and forth. The devil in my head, I need meds or some type of source. Young nigga treating getting bread like some type of sport. I told the dumb bitch I need head, don't fight the force. I said what I said is what I said, don't go back and forth. The devil in my head, I need meds or some type of source.
Young nigga treating getting bread like some type of sport. The bitch took my dick and ran off, she should go to court. I'm riding through my neighborhood in a brand new Porsche. I dropped the top on that, put that bitch in sport. My shooter do it when he bored, he ain't got no reason. Chase his ass down, heard it, you is not no demon. Stink team with the ghetto boys, we got taco season. Shit been getting hot around this bitch, so my watch is freezing. Overkill shit, we do not get even. All you hear is skrrr, that sound like a demon. Told the dumb bitch you need a straw, how you drinking semen. Told the bitch that I want the whole fear, she can keep it.
Young nigga treating getting bread like some type of sport. I told the dumb bitch I need head, don't fight the force. I said what I said is what I said, don't go back and forth. The devil in my head, I need meds or some type of source. Young nigga treating getting bread like some type of sport. I told the dumb bitch I need head, don't fight the force. I said what I said is what I said, don't go back and forth. The devil in my head, I need meds or some type of source. I'm the truth, I'm not you, I don't gotta force it. Nobody's safe out here when we doing extorting. Nobody's safe in LA, better move out the orbit. He the type of nigga to get a bag and think he cool in Northern. One thing about the street rules, you gotta enforce them. Once I put the heater to the beef, I gotta torch it. Bitch talking about some you like me, Ralphie, kinda sorta. Told the bitch I need bread and head in that exact order. We can really get some money, just follow orders. I'm addicted to buying design like some type of hoarder. I told the dumb bitch I'm a dog, I tried to warn her. Coach shit, I be getting bread from all type of foreigners. Young nigga treating getting bread like some type of sport. I told the dumb bitch I need head, don't fight the force. I said what I said is what I said, don't go back and forth. The devil in my head, I need meds or some type of source. Young nigga treating getting bread like some type of sport. I told the dumb bitch I need head, don't fight the force. I said what I said is what I said, don't go back and forth. The devil in my head, I need meds or some type of source. Shit for niggas getting money, this ain't no party music. Gang and them be thrilled to go sliding, who car we using? Everything the plug drop is hot, I make arson music. I put a beam on a nigga head, give him the mark of booty. I make shit for niggas getting money, this ain't no party music. Gang and them be thrilled to go sliding, who car we using? Everything the plug drop is hot, I make arson music. I put a beam on a nigga head, give him the mark of booty. The stink team be really getting money, this is not an illusion. Bitch, I like head and bread, so it's no confusion. I know you gave her money for some pussy, cause she gave it to me. Chain swinging, hopping out of spaceships, nothing major to me. Make sure you keep the camera rolling, it's gonna be a major movie. No, I don't want no pussy from you, bitch, you can say them cooties. Late night with a can of Ruger, got me feeling like Freddy Krueger. Street nigga in the jungle, tryna find me a famous cougar. Niggas lying, talking about they knock my teeth out, that's a famous rumor. All the homies had a session with your bitch, she's a famous tutor. I probably gon' listen to all my songs, cause there ain't no blue. How the plug get some money from your bitch, bitch and she ain't no chooser. Put a hole in nigga head, give him the mark of Buddha. Diamonds breakdancing, Mr. Whiskers and my Buddha. This ain't for shaking ass, this for you go get your moolah. I ain't going back and forth for no op, who car we using? So ain't shit for niggas getting money, this ain't no party music. Gang and them be thrilled to go sliding, who car we using? Everything the plug drop is hot, I make arson music. I put a beam on a nigga head, give him the mark of Buddha. I make shit for niggas getting money, this ain't no party music. Gang and them be thrilled to go sliding, who car we using? Everything the plug drop is hot, I make arson music. I put a beam on a nigga head, give him the mark of Buddha.
Any nigga go against the team, gon' be target practice. I hit him with the Erkin jerkies, a party spell his brains. That'll boost your little name, so I charge the shooter. Maniac, don't got it all, I'm partially stupid. The drums and bass that I brought made the party scramble. Banana clips in my fist, thought he saw chimpanzees. They get hot in Hill's kitchen, she call up Ramsey. Wonton chopsticks like it's Kung Fu Panda. If we hoopin', I be shooting all month like it's March Madness. It was a joke when he died, but I'm not laughing. He had a stick, I had a drum, guess I shot faster. Left cancer holes in his throat, they like stop blasting. The cord dragged him, it's tragic, it's cop sirens. He always keep a street sweep, why is mops behind? These niggas police, little jabronis. He smell with the rock cooking, I'm a stony in the road.
I make shit for niggas getting money, this ain't no party music. Gang and them be thrilled to go sliding, who car we using? Everything the plug drop is hot, I make arson music. I put a beam on a nigga head, give him the mark of Buddha. I make shit for niggas getting money, this ain't no party music. Gang and them be thrilled to go sliding, who car we using? Everything the plug drop is hot, I make arson music. I put a beam on a nigga head, give him the mark of Buddha. They like Ralph be smoking gas, no that nigga pulled it. What you thought the plug was going broke, you must be stupid. How you ever expect to get a win, your gang is losers. They like the plug flow hot, he make arson music. This the type of shit you cut on the car when the gang is trooping. Everybody know the plug was up getting money before the rules. You don't want me, bitch, I'm for the birds and that pussy Caco dude. If it's beef, the gang and them bringing shells like Taco Tuesday. Fun bitch better not play with me, I'm not in the mood today. I'm only open up to getting money, ain't no room for changing. I got my ties, get you whack, I'm a funeral arranger. Money and drugs, only thing make your bitch get in the coupe with a stranger. She don't want no pipsqueak, she like hanging around dangerous. I was a Billy badass, I was the type of nigga late to detention. You was stuck in the suburbs, them ain't the trenches. He got his money took and heart broke, putting his faith in them bitches. I make shit for niggas getting money, this ain't no party music. Gang and them be thrilled to go sliding, who car we using? Everything the plug drop is hot, I make arson music. I put a beam on a nigga head, give him the mark of Buddha. I make shit for niggas getting money, this ain't no party music. Gang and them be thrilled to go sliding, who car we using? Everything the plug drop is hot, I make arson music. I put a beam on a nigga head, give him the mark of Buddha.
We Japanese still. You getting cooked in front of your family like a Japanese meal. It's y'all soup the hibachi, and none of you niggas can stop me, but can't help but watch me. Yo, as promised, today we're back. It's Friday. It's E1B1A day, aka E1B1A Friday. Tonight we're gonna be discussing the Bantu expansion information. Tonight we're going to break down why you see certain dates in correlation with the expansion, what the expansion was about, how much archaeological visibility that we have when it comes to the Bantu expansion. And the reason why this is important to discuss this is because what happens is on the internet and within this small community that we know as Afrocentrics, conscious community, ABOS, however you call them, ABOS, Black Hebrew Israelites, a lot of skimming goes on, a lot of surface dwelling takes place where people are really not familiar with the topics at hand, so they make mistakes when they engage in arguments, when they're trying to teach someone or they're trying to refute or whatever the case may be. A lot of errors can be avoided if the time was taken out to research and study this stuff. So today we're going to be dealing with E1B1A Friday. I'll make this short and sweet, hopefully. And if you guys want to learn this, stay. If not, You can click off the video. But with that being stated, we're going to jump right into the first article tonight. And that article here is I got a couple articles up, so I want to go straight to the first one. The article is going to be dealing with the Bantu expansion, and I think it's a great one. Here it is: phylogeographic analysis of the Bantu language expansion supports a rainforest route, and this was published in pnas.org, and it's very recent, August the 1st, 2022. So I like to bring the up-to-date scholarship so you guys are getting the knowledge as it comes out and the information as it comes out, as opposed to just giving you guys outdated stuff. So try to be as up-to-date as possible. So with that being stated, as you guys see the article here, let's get into this. Let's break this down. So, significance. Southern Africa has been shaped by the large-scale expansion of Bantu populations fueled by agriculture. Currently, 240 million people speak one of the more than 500 Bantu languages. However, the timing and geographic routes undergone by the Bantu populations remain largely unknown. So this is the first point that I want to touch on and give emphasis on, because when people speak about the Bantu expansion, they make a lot of definitive claims. It had to happen during this period, or it had to happen long, if you're an Israelite or you claim an Israelite lineage, well, this happened long before the Israelites, which doesn't stop someone from being a part of the Israelite formative culture or complex. That doesn't stop you. You can just say that they migrated later. But a lot of these arguments are erroneous, and this is mainly why. A lot of this is unknown. A lot what we know about sub-Saharan African peoples in general and sub-Saharan African culture in general is a mystery. But you'll see pundits on Garfield, Sarnetta TV, Shaka Atmos. You'll see people making definitive claims about these people and about who they were and where they always been, according to them. And it's just clear they're not reading this material. They're not. So again, it's largely unknown. It says we use cutting-edge phylogeographic techniques to show that Bantu populations migrated through Central African tropical rainforests around 4,400 years ago. This adds to the growing evidence that agricultural expansion can successfully overcome ecological challenges as they unfold. Abstract. The Bantu expansion transformed the linguistic, economic, and cultural composition of sub-Saharan Africa, and that's a very good point to bring out as well, hone in on. When the Bantus began to move and expand, they were reducing the other populations that were there, mainly the Sun-related people that at one point in time, the Sun-related people proliferated Western Africa. And even David Reich says that they don't originally start off in Western Central Africa, that they come from the north, actually. When you actually read these papers, you get a lot of insight on what the field of genetics is unveiling about sub-Saharan Africa. These people are very migratory. But if you listen to some of these pundits on the internet, they'll make you think that they were isolates and they never did any traveling, never did any migrating. Everybody was just stuck in one location. The only people that traveled were Eurasians, were the descendants of FM89, if you let them tell it. But as we can see, that's not the case. Shout out to David Reich and his cohorts. So it says, however, the exact dates and routes taken by the ancestors of the speakers of more than 500 current Bantu languages remain uncertain. So why do we have so many people pretty much making definitive claims about these people? And in the scientific literature is not stating these things. Right? It's like a tabloid. A tabloid may talk about a scientific article, but of course they're going to blow it out of proportion. Like I always bring up Montana Man, where it says every Native American, you got the tabloid saying every Native American that says from Montana Man. Well, here's the problem. The Montana man died as a boy. He didn't have any kids. The likelihood of him having children is very low. So, of course, he was not the father of all extant Native American populations. But that's the type of heading that you will see to generate hype to get more clicks, right? And that's basically what happens in the consciousness community, the Black Hebrew Israelite community. They make these statements, these grandiose statements that don't match the data. The data is actually uncertain at this point, right? So that's why we use parsimony and try to come with the best explanations for these things. Let's continue to read. It says, here we use the recently developed breakaway geographical diffusion model, specially designed for modeling migrations with augmented geographic information to reconstruct the Bantu language family. So this is the model they're using. It's a geographical diffusion model. And they're going to reveal that they're using archaeology, which is going to be very interesting about these dates here. So we'll discuss that once we cross that road. It says this Bayesian phylogeographic approach with augmented geographical data provides a powerful way of linking linguistic, archaeological, and genetic data to test hypotheses about large language family expansions. So again, if you've been watching the channel, you guys should know what a hypothesis is. A hypothesis is a statement unproven, pretty much an unproven statement, right? So that's what a hypothesis is. Also, the Bayesian phylogeographic approach. The Bayesian was named after a Christian scientist. It's just a method of pretty much parsimony, trying to find the best explanation for a thing that occurred. It says here, we compare 4 hypotheses: an early major split north of the rainforest, a migration through the Sangha River interval corridor around 2500 BP. So 2500 years ago, that would put you around 500 BCE is where that one is placing it. A coastal migration around 4000 BP, that will put you around 2000 BCE. It says, and a migration through the rainforest before the corridor opening at 4000 BP. Our results produce a topology and timeline for Bantu language family, which supports the hypothesis of expansion through Central African tropical results at 4420 BP, 4040 to 5095% highest posterior density interval, well before the Sangha River interval was open. So those are the claims here, the 4 theories. You have the 2500, the 4000, and the other one's 4000 as well, just a different route. And then the conclusion that they came to was 4420. It says the Bantu expansion was a massive migration that reshaped the linguistic and cultural landscape of Africa. We discuss this all the time. The reason why, because people that were E1B1A carriers pretty much dominated, subjugated the other tribes that were in sub-Saharan Africa, like the Sun-related people and the Pygmy-related people, and pushed them down south. It says here, it led to the proliferation of Bantu-speaking populations through sub-Saharan Africa. Today, more than 500 languages classified as Bantu are spoken by 240 million people across an area of 9 million square kilometers. This expansion has been associated with major economic and cultural changes across sub-Saharan Africa, including a more sedentary way of life, ironworking, and crop cultivation, plants that are significant to subsistence across Africa today, such as pearl millet and fonio, have names of Bantu origin, suggesting that agriculture innovation fueled the expansion of this language family. The origin or homeland of this process is generally believed to be near the border of Nigeria and Cameroon. And as we brought out in prior shows, Cameroon in particular, and also Nigeria, is very intriguing because Cameroon has certain European markers, especially the mtDNA HV0 marker, where we read a paper that indicates that an ancient Near Eastern migration actually traveled into Africa, penetrated sub-Saharan Africa, and made its way to Cameroon. Cameroon is very interesting with T markers, R markers. These are Eurasian markers that have made their way to sub-Saharan Africa and made their way to sub-Saharan Africa in times past in the ancient world, right? So I always bring stuff like that up because you have pundits that just think that migration to sub-Saharan Africa is impossible in the old world, which is not true. Right here says, in its time of origin is believed to be between 4,000 and 5,000 years BP. So, what is this talking about here? Its time of origin, the Bantu language family. So, the reason why you see them constricting these migratory dates to the 4,000 year, 3 out of the 4 theories, is because that's when they believe that the Bantu language sprung. So that's why they put the beginning of the expansion of the language of the people with the language, which I believe is flawed. But they know this. That's why it's a hypothesis and it's uncertain because they're basing it off of the age, the prescribed age of the language. It says, despite our knowledge about this expansion, substantial uncertainty remains about the route and environmental conditions faced by early Bantu-speaking populations as they expanded from the point in a southward path across Africa. Robust linguistic and genetic evidence, as well as a general lack of pre-existing hunter-gatherer populations documented archaeologically in much of the current Democratic Republic of the Congo, indicate that the current distribution of Bantu population is mainly due to a population expansion, as opposed to cultural diffusion, whereby the languages rather than speakers spread through their progressive adoption by the local hunter-gatherer groups. So basically what this says is what I said earlier, that E1B1A peoples are coming in and reducing and replacing the people. And this is why you start seeing the spread of the Bantu languages, not in a cultural diffusion. Cultural diffusion is just the transportation of the ideas. Ademic diffusion, which is what the Bantu migrations were, is actually the travel and movement of actual people. It says the fundamental challenge posed by this picture is the presence of a massive Central African tropical rainforest, which at the time of the Bantu expansion covered the region between the Atlantic coast and the African Great Lakes. Tropical rainforests, both in Africa and elsewhere, have been considered a barrier to the expansion of agricultural groups. Poor soils and difficulty of navigation have been seen as particularly problematic for the expansion of dry crops such as pearl millet and fonio, which are staple sources of nutrition of Bantu peoples. And this is also an indication that we know most likely the Bantu expansion didn't occur when they set the parameters for the language starting like 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, because most of sub-Saharan Africa was heavily forested at that time. So what do they need to travel through these places? They need iron. You need iron tools. You need tools that are strong enough to induce deforestation, so you can travel better and open up these corridors, to open up routes to make the trek and the expansion, right? It says, in order to account for the hurdle imposed by the rainforest in the history of Bantu expansion, 3 main hypotheses have been proposed in the literature so far, each receiving different degrees of support from genetics, linguistics, and archaeology. Early split hypothesis. Bantu languages have traditionally been grouped into 2 major branches, Eastern and Western, on the basis of extensive linguistic scholarship, which has served as a main starting point from which to investigate the history of the Bantu expansion. So again, what is this? What is the starting point for the Bantu expansion? The linguistic scholarship. So they're basing the date, as we saw earlier, 4,000, 5,000 years, off of when they think the Bantu expansion, the Bantu language groups originated. It has nothing to do with archaeological finds, as we're going to see. It has nothing to do with DNA. There are no DNA samples that go back that old that are related to Bantu peoples. So it's pretty much, this is where it lives and dies, off of where they date the origin of the language. Eastern Bantu languages cover the region east of the African Great Lakes, from the region around Lake Victoria in the north to modern-day South Africa in the south, whereas Western Bantu languages range from the Guinea Gulf in the north to modern Namibia in the south. The early split hypothesis proposes that these 2 branches had split already during the peopling of the homeland in West Africa. According to this hypothesis, only West Bantu speakers entered the rainforest, while the East Bantu branch avoided it by moving eastward toward the African Great Lakes region, first and heading south afterward. East east-west migrations of agricultural populations are in general more common than north and south migrations, since the former face a more gradual variation in climate and habitat, which facilitates the spread of crops. And then they have the pictorials for the four different split models, right? Again, they have the dates here. So you can see one starting around Cameroon and then going south through the forest and going to the east and then going down. B is the late split one. It says it went through a corridor to the south and then went east. And the C one we just read was the coastal route to try to get around the forested regions of Central Africa and then spread eastward and southward. And the late split interior, which will be the early date of the youngest date of 2,500 years ago, will have them go down south and then eastward. I'm leaning more towards this for several reasons, because during this time they will have the technology, iron technology, to induce deforestation to actually travel this route successfully. Anyway, it says here, late split hypothesis through the Songhai River interval. By contrast, several linguistics and genetic studies suggest that East Bantu is one independent linguistic branch that split from the main West Bantu branch after the rainforest was traversed. It has been hypothesized that this traversal was possible as a result of the late Holocene rainforest crisis, a sudden shrinkage of the African forest, which occurred between 3,000 and 2,500 BP. Again, we're reading a late split here. This is more parsimonious, in my opinion, than what happened here. Forest is shrinking. And they also have, like I said, they have the actual tools to get the job done. It says, during this event, primary forest trees were greatly reduced and a major expansion of savannas took place. In this context, a 400-kilometer wide corridor known as the Songhai River Interval opened, connecting the north and the south ends of the rainforest zone, enabling dry crops to be effectively transferred and grown through the rainforest, thus allowing for the continuity in the Bantu agriculturalist practices. According to paleoclimatic datings of these events, this hypothesis implies that the eastern branch emerged only circa 2000 BP after the corridor was completely open and posterior southward migration of the Bantu populations occurred. The late split hypothesis through a coastal route. Although the previous hypothesis would account better for the general topology of Bantu linguistic tree, the east branch emerging out of the west branch instead of an initial early split, it fails to explain the time depth of existing archaeological evidence. East Bantu settlements dated to 3,000 years before present have been found more than 1,500 kilometers beyond the Songhai River interval, suggesting a much earlier migration to the rainforest. As a consequence, a third hypothesis has been proposed, consistent both with the late split topology observed in the linguistic reconstructions with an earlier divergence time for the eastern branch. This envisions a migration through a coastal route that surrounds the rainforest, skirting modern-day Gabon. According to this hypothesis, coastal plains or drier forests, which are found in the Atlantic Ocean, could have provided useful pathways for the expansion of farming. This hypothesis allows for early divergence time for the main two Bantu branches, circa 4,000 years before present. So this will put the expansion 2000 BCE. And again, this is the late split hypothesis here, the coastal one, and that's number C. It says here, the late split hypothesis through the rainforest interior. Previous geographic reconstructions of Bantu expansion consistently find a migration route in the interior of the rainforest, far from the proposed coastal route. Although these studies tend to interpret this result as supporting the late split through the Songhai River interval hypothesis, this interpretation yields an inconsistent dating of the migration events. In dated reconstruction, the age of the eastern branch is 2,500 BP. We would expect the eastern branch to post-date the opening of the Savannah corridor, which only fully opened around 2,500 BP. Therefore, it's hard to reconcile this age with an expansion through the corridor. Alternatively, we could take the predictions of these models at face value and consider a migration through the interior of the rainforest before the opening of the Sangha River interval, which has been disregarded as implausible until now. Recent developments in the study of human and rainforest interactions have triggered a profound rethinking of the likelihood of agricultural expansion through Central African rainforests. To start with, tropical forests in Central Africa are incredibly diverse and not homogeneously characterized by dense evergreen rainforests, which cannot be easily traversed. Instead, more open forest types near river courses, which are plentiful in the Congo Basin, may have offered significant pathways of movement. Furthermore, while studies show that major tropical forests retreat did not occur until 3000 BP to 2000 BP, it is possible that drier forest types, which would have been appealing to cultivators, began to dominate significant portions of what become the Sangha River interval much earlier. In addition to this, growing evidence shows that human societies dramatically modified the Central African rainforest through the slash and burn practices, creating a niche for agricultural lifestyles with noticeable effects already by 3000 BP. So the evidence is 3000 to 2000 BP, but they're proposing the 4000. Because remember earlier, that's the date they give for the origin of Bantu languages. So if anyone says, oh, this happened 4,000 years ago, it's because the root of it goes back to the linguistic argument. When we look at the agricultural side of things, it's much more recent. When we look at the slash and burn, as we just seen, what you need tools to do that, preferably iron tools. You don't get that till later, not in 4000 BC. You get that in sub-Saharan Africa around 3000 BCE and later. All right, so let's keep reading this. Where did we stop here? No, we were down here. So, as we read, we were at the slash and burn practice, creating a niche for agricultural lifestyles with noticeable effects already by 3000 BP. Finally, the substance of expanding agriculturalist groups might have been more complex than it is often described, as proposed by Kleiman, based on the theory of a slow revolution of farming in sub-equatorial Africa. According to this account of archaeological and linguistic data, Bantu settlers left West Cameroon with a knowledge of agriculture centered on the cultivation of root crops. And real quick, before we move on to this, I don't want to speed past this part here. When did they learn how to cultivate root crops? For majority of sub-Saharan African history, they had no agriculture. For majority of it. They also had no knowledge of metallurgy. There is no copper age in sub-Saharan Africa. There is no copper to bronze age in sub-Saharan Africa. You understand? They go straight to iron. So where did this knowledge come from? Where did this understanding on how to take raw iron out of the ground and go through the process of smelting it using lime to remove impurities, right? A very complicated process, especially in the old world. Where did they learn that from? It's very complicated. They just fall out the sky. So these are the questions that need to be posed, right? And my hypothesis, my theory, is that these people had this because they were not in this region. They were in the regions that were familiar with metallurgy. Preferably Southwest Asia, Egypt, North Africa, they were familiar with that. And we know that sub-Saharan African, what we call sub-Saharan African peoples, E1B1A peoples, were in Kirkwine, which is in North Africa. We know they were in Egypt because we have Ramesses III, and we do have traces of our DNA in that region. And we know it was in the Levant because the 8 distinct Jewish populations today have our DNA, or as they label it, Yoruba DNA, And the Luya Bantu DNA, which dates before the 8th century, before the diasporic times, and prime majority and her cohorts, they put it like this: the Israelites were admixed with Africans prior to the diaspora. So we know they were there, and then we see this happen, and we see these people coming into sub-Saharan Africa with the ability to cultivate root crops, with the ability of metallurgy, and also bringing in other things like bananas, coconuts. That's Southwest Asian crops. Millet, cowpeas and stuff of that nature. These are all Southwest Asian. So when you look at all those things together, collectively, I think it's very clear why these people were able to do this. And that's why Fruticus says part of that back migration could have been through the Bantu expansion. That could have been an expansion of Eurasian-like peoples coming back into sub-Saharan Africa, and that's published in a science book. Right? We brought it out. Tony Fruticus, his book on photo. What's the title of his book? I'll pull it up and reference it. It says, in 2, use stone axes and digging sticks to prepare and plant fields. 3, hunting and fishing were important sources of subsistence, probably learned from earlier neighboring populations. According to this reference, the acquisition of pottery allowed for demographic growth, and polished stone axes and hoes helped clear settlements in the forest. Migration would have occurred along major rivers several centuries before the full opening of the Sangha River interval, right? So these people will have to invoke stone. You know why they have to invoke stone? Because if you say 4,000, this happened 4,000 years ago, that's all that was available there. You have the stone and metal age in Africa. For majority of the Neolithic, sub-Saharan Africans were only familiar with stone tools and stuff of that nature, and they jumped straight to iron around 3,000 years ago. Right? Anyway, putting all the strands of evidence together, we introduce a 4th hypothesis, which would account for all the facts of the Bantu expansion and late divergence between Eastern and Western Bantu branches after passing through the Central African rainforest well before the opening of the Sangha interval. In the present paper, we evaluate the plausibility of these 4 hypotheses using a state-of-the-art Bayesian phylogeographic approach applied to large-scale vocabulary data, historical, archaeological, and paleoclimatic evidence. Phylogeographic approaches to language expansions. Given the demic nature of the Bantu language expansion, again, why does it say demic? Because the Bantu expansion was the spread of peoples, not just ideas. Phylogenetic inference, and more concretely, phylogeographic methods have been a fundamental tool in reconstructing its geographical route and origins. These models usually consider a random walk through continuous space along the branches of a tree, which combined with the cognate-coded linguistic data allows joint reconstruction of linguistic and geographical history. While the underlying assumptions might not hold for a number of tested language histories, this methodology has proven fruitful in testing different migration and expansion hypotheses across language families and regions of the world, including those relating to Austronesian, Indo-European, Dravidian, Palmo-Nugan, Semitic, Sino-Tibetan, Tungusic languages. Similarly, phylogenetic studies of the Bantu languages and their populations have successfully enhanced our understanding of the dynamics in the dating of the expansion. So again, that's how they dated through the language, the origin of the language. However, the modeling assumptions underlying these methods could give rise to biased inferences, either because they might be at odds with what is known about the dynamics of human groups, or because of limitations in the modeling of space, or because they are derived from a partial analysis of the populations under study. And I think ding, ding, ding is the last one. We need more information on sub-Saharan Africa. We need more specimens. We need more bodies dug up out the ground and exhumed, taking the petrous bone and finding out exactly when these people were there. Because to this day, we don't have any Western Central African remains that are E1B1A. The oldest E1B1A found in Africa is in the east. It's in the Horn. Motaman. That's the oldest. And dates vary, but they use the median, which is 2500 BCE. And that's E1B1A2, by the way. Right? Next up is Ramesses III, which is about 1100 BCE, so about 3100 years ago they date him. The bodies that David Reich discovered in Cameroon, ancient Cameroon, Sri Lanka, they were all A or B. And that's why David Reich in his paper had to keep it funky. He had to say, listen, the early populations of Western Central Africa may not be represented by the present population. And a lot of people have a problem with that. Because what I'm noticing, there's a lot of people trying to stick E1B1A peoples in sub-Saharan Africa in perpetuity, and that doesn't make any sense. We found the ancient remains of E1B1A peoples in France. We found them in Corsica, right? We found them outside the bounds that you're trying to constrict them to, right? So, anyway. Challenge 1, dynamics of human migrations. Standard phylogeographic models approximate the spread and diversification of languages with a simple diffusion model. In particular, most standard models assume that after a language splits into a number of descendants, the descendants spread spatially with the same speed in random directions. However, this is not realistic, as many well-attested migratory histories reveal starkly different dynamics. For instance, Austronesian languages spread through the Pacific in a sequence of expansion pulses and settlement pauses. One of the major consequences of assuming a simplified equal rate dynamics is that it tends to allocate the putative homeland of a group of languages somewhere close to their geographic centroid. This is clearly not the case for the well-studied language families, the Austronesians, Sino-Tibetan, and Uto-Aztecan, all developed from the periphery of their present-day geographic distributions. This is also a concern in the case of Bantu expansion, where the robust scholarship has established a border between Cameroon and Nigeria as its homeland. And that's why I love science, because what are they doing in this paper? They're giving you the flaws of the argument, right? Because again, what is the focal point? Why do they start here? Why do they believe it happened 4,000 or 5,000 years ago? Is because of the language and when they believe the language originated. But these guys have integrity, and these research companies are peer reviewed, so they have to be honest. So listen, we use that method, but that method may not be true, right? Because you can't just say, well, we think the language starts and it has to be the homeland, when this language could have started in the periphery somewhere outside of the place that we designate as the origin point. And even more so with Niger-Kadorfian languages, because they're not written. So it's purely speculation on where these places start, because we have no script or anything dating back to these times. Challenge number 2 is spherical geography. Large linguistic families such as Bantu, Pama-Nugan, Austronesian, and Uto-Aztecan cover a large latitudinal range. If latitude and longitude are treated as coordinates on a plane, this latitudinal extension generates a distortion in distances, because the actual geometry of the world's area is better approximated by a sphere. While this could be ameliorated through specific coordinate transformations, the bias would persist at the extremes of the range of the spatial extension, thus biasing inferences about the spatial process. Challenge number 3, geographic sampling bias. Data availability differs substantially across languages and language groups, and in general, 35 to 42% of languages of the world remain to be described in detail. This problem is particularly critical for phylogeographic methods when the distribution of data availability is spatially structured. It has been shown that geographic sampling biases can lead to erroneous inferences in root location, migration rates, time depths, and in consequence, the emergent history of the groups under study. In particular, the coverage of our sample on Bantu languages is skewed, being higher in regions such as of the northeast of Bantu-speaking region, while it's lower in others such as south of the southwest. So again, they're giving all the challenges to the hypothesis, and again, time depths, because again, what were they assuming? How are they coming up with this 4,000 to 5,000 year range? Is because strictly the language is nothing else. The archaeology doesn't show that. The slash and burn doesn't show that. The corridors don't open up during that time. So the language is pretty much the glue that's holding that hypothesis together. Challenge 4, multiple waves of migration. It is often the case that several waves of populations colonize a region, as has been proven for Southeast Asia and the Americas. In particular, it could be that multiple population waves originate from the same homeland and span over similar territories. This has been argued to be the case during the Bantu expansion based on archaeological evidence. Phylogeographic methods rely on non-linguistic evidence, for example, archaeological sites, for calibrating the dates of known events along the tree. However, in the case of migration in multiple ways, some of these calibrated events might correspond to populations and languages that are different from the ones that will end up diversifying into the current languages we aim to model. And then we get here, a robust and realistic model for the Bantu expansion. In this work, we analyze a large data set of cognate-coded basic vocabulary from 419 Bantu and related Bantoid languages, and implement a model-based approach for building its phylogeography. We address the first and second challenges mentioned above by using a breakaway or founder event dispersal model. Under this model, population split led to one of the subpopulations staying in place and the other one diffusing away. This adequately captures the dynamics that take place when founder populations migrate to colonize a new territory. In addition, this model calculates the diffusion on a spherical surface representing the globe rather than on the plane, therefore minimizing distortion due to the large latitudinal range covered by the Bantu family. We'll address the third challenge by tailoring a method used by geneticists when dealing with a similar issue. Despite the skewed data distribution for Bantu languages, we do have access to the approximate geographic coordinates of languages for which no cognate data are available, as well as historical linguistic judgments in relation to the affiliation of such languages, where they belong in the linguistic tree proposed as a classic comparative method. With this information, we can produce multiple imputations of the unobserved languages by placing them in a putative clade. So what does all this mean? Basically, they're trying to plot out the age of this language, the growth of this language, the split of this language based off what they know, the little that they know on these languages. This is why they say we can produce multiple imputations of the unobserved languages by placing them in putative clades. If you guys have been following for a while, you should know what putative means. But if not, let me get you guys the definition of what does it mean to be putative. So the word putative means generally considered or reputed to be, right? So that's what the word putative is. And this is, I was going to debate, sidebar, I was going to debate Ankh on science, the field of science, and the debate topic was going to be pretty much does scientists believe, right? And this was going to kill him because basically putative is pretty much the scientist's way of saying this is what we believe what happened, or this is what the claims that we believe took place. That's what that word putative denotes, right? Putative is the same thing. Why? Because we're dealing with hypothesis, unproven statement. We don't have a script. They call them unobserved languages. There's no documentation of this stuff. They're just trying to figure out how did the language get to the point that it's at now and how did this expansion occur. There's a lot of blanks to fill in there, so they have to use a scientific method, which is nothing wrong with that. We use a scientific method as well. You have to be honest about what's taking place. A lot of people they're not honest because they don't read this stuff. You have to first start off reading these papers. That's the starting point, is actually reading. And as the good book says, and all thy getting, getteth understanding, right? It says, thus yielding a full tree of Bantu languages. So they basically, it's putative. It says this technique known as sequence-free sampling has proven to be very successful in alleviating the geographic sampling bias in genetics, although it has yet to be applied to linguistic data. Finally, we want to make our reconstruction consistent with the possibility of 2 waves of Bantu population migrating southward, as had been recently proposed. For this, we eliminate one calibration point corresponding to East Bantu archaeological sites south of the rainforest at 2500 BP. Keeping this calibration here would imply not only that current East Bantu speakers are direct descendants of the population responsible for this archaeological site, but also that crossing the rainforest was finished by this time, biasing the comparison of our hypothesis. Results. Here we present the Bayesian phylogeographic evaluation of 4 hypotheses introduced in the previous section. In summary, our analysis pipeline consists of 3 parts. Part 1, we produce a posterior distribution of dated linguistic phylogenetic trees from cognate data taken from basic vocabulary. Part 2, based on these trees and geographic location of Bantu and Bantoid languages, we produce estimates of spatial spread of the Bantu expansion through their history. Part 3, we enrich our lexical database with sequence-free sampling, leading to precise estimation of the biases introduced by geographical sampling. And again, how they do this part? They pretty much made putative clades to fill out this language tree and try to figure out when this language started. Part 1, dated phylogenetic tree of Bantu languages. We deployed a Bayesian phylogenetic analysis for 419 Bantu and Bantoid languages, lexical data. We implemented our inference in the software beast, choosing the best site model and clock specification as resulting from modern selection approach. Again, inference. That's what that is. You know, I have to point out these different words and give you all the vocabulary. It is because if I don't do it, you'll get a lot of people, you know, mainly people that are calling themselves conscious or whatnot, quoting stuff like this as if it's definitive, like scientists are omniscient and they look into a crystal ball. A lot of, especially again, when you're dealing with scientific data that's, you know, in regards to especially places like sub-Saharan Africa, where you know very little about, you're going to have to go putative. You're going to have to use parsimony. You're going to have to create models because we don't have anything else short of a damn time machine. So it's not a knock on the scientific process, but what happens is these laymen, they don't have any understanding of it. They don't read this stuff and they don't even have a terminal understanding. So they'll go and try to regurgitate information as if the information that they're saying is 100% fact. And that's the same attitude that Teyu has. He said, I'm 100% convinced, no one can convince me otherwise. That's not a scientific mind. You got to always approach situations and information as if you could be wrong. And that's how they wrote this paper. That's how most scientific papers are written. They're not allowed to say I'm 100% right on everything. All right? But let's talk about this putative word real quick. This is Biology Online. And let's talk about what putative means, because a lot of people that are, thank you, LeBun, that deals with scientism and just believes every damn thing that comes out of the science's mouth, right, are usually unaware of this stuff, right? So putative, right here, is denoting a supposition or inference based on what was commonly believed. And this is why when you know, I tried to get Unc to debate me, I was like, let's debate on this. You basically claim that scientists don't deal with belief. They don't believe anything they know. That's not true. And that shows me that this guy does not read the literature. He does not sit down and read the literature, because the literature is replete with this type of language. Because all of science is not empirical. A lot of it is putative. Right? Because we're not omniscient beings. We're not all-knowing beings. We have to figure things out. to the best of our ability. You know, we're not gods. We don't have the all-seeing eye, right? We don't have that. So this is what we have to do: construct these models and see what is the most feasible with the available data set, right? So putative means denoting a supposition or inference based on what was commonly believed, reputed, or deemed rather than on a direct evidence, right? In biology, the term is commonly used to describe an entity or a concept that is based on what is generally accepted or inferred, even without direct proof of it. Meaning it denotes something like an inference or a supposition that is accepted because it is deemed to be the case or what has been commonly believed, even without solid evidence to back it up. So when people invoke 5,000 years for the Bantu, this paper says 5,000 years. That is based off putative clades of an unobserved language. That's what it's based off of. Now, whether it's true or not, we don't know. It could be true, but this is not definitive. All right? And then they give you putative examples. Again, I was going to tear Unc ass up. I was like, I can tell you haven't read the literature. You don't read this stuff. You don't. You're a talking head on the internet. That's it. The etymology of the word putative came from the Middle East, Middle French, putative, in Latin, putativus, meaning suppose, purported. It says here, meaning thought, suppose, purported. Putative gene, for instance, here's an example here, the putative gene refers to a nucleotide sequence believed to be a gene because of its open reading frame. However, its function in the protein it codes for has not been fully identified. For example, putative gene 57 is the temporary name suggested for the gene coding for a protein produced. As you can see right here, they give you a whole bunch of examples of this. This type of language is replete in the scientific literature. So let's go back. The whole Bayesian method is based off that, right? That's the whole Bayesian method. We're going to break that down here in a minute. But I'm reading these articles. I want y'all to get familiar with these secular arguments and the secular papers. You got to know this stuff, especially if you're going to really get serious about DNA. You got to know what the geneticists are publishing and understand it. All right, let's go back. Let's go back to the paper. Finish reading this. New Hope says basic rule of scholarship. If you don't know a word, look it up. Exactly. Let me block these people in the chat. The bots are in the building. Let's keep going. And moderators, if y'all see bots, please block them and get them out of there. I see some of you guys are in the chat. All right, so back here, it says we implemented our inference in the software beast, choosing the best site model and clock specification as resulting from model selection approach. The resulting maximum clade credibility tree is shown in the SI appendix, where the languages are grouping into 24 clades for display purposes. The origin of the Bantu languages is dated to 4,940 BP. 95% higher posterior density interval is 4,500 to 5,400 BP. The second oldest node represented split between narrow Bantu and northwestern branch, and Mbambubi has a median range of 4,140 BP. It is noticeable that two main branches emerge from this node, one containing the northwestern languages, which populate the region currently covered by the rainforest, and the remaining containing the languages south and east of it. Most of the 24 clades shown here can be traced to those in the consensus tree of a previous publication with minor differences. A few mixtures between clades 12 and 13 and the splits of clades 2 and 7. The main difference resides in the relations between these clades. That study, as well as previous Bantu phylogenies, present a backbone from which languages gradually split into smaller groups. This contrasts with a large split at 3,560 BP. Also, we infer that the central western branch is non-monophyletic, but it is instead divided into two large sub-branches from node 2. The geographic model. We implemented combined analysis, including a linguistic as well as geographic model, in order to find an explicit migration route consistent with the tree topology obtained in the previous section. We used a breakaway geographic model implemented in Beast 2 as described in Materials and Methods. Notice that in all cases we describe an expansion of single groups of peoples. A recent study based on archaeological evidence, however, challenges this concept, arguing that a massive population collapse took place between 1600 and 1400 BP, and new waves of Bantu-speaking population repopulated areas left empty by extinct earlier Bantu-speaking population. Shout out to James, because he actually brought this study out and read it live on the channel. All right. We obtain a posterior distribution of trees whose maximum clade credibility tree is shown in Figure 2. A more detailed tree showing the languages, including each clade, can be found in SI appendix. And the full tree is shown in dataset SS2. The median age root is estimated to be 5,110 BP, while the split between narrow Bantu and the northwestern branch Mbambubi dates to 4,420 BP. Differences between the trees built solely on lexical material and the combined lexical plus geographical tree are relatively minor. The most important difference is the location of the language Sakata assigned to clade 5 in the lexical tree and reclassified with the combined model into clade 9. This is consistent with the expert judgments reflected in glottal log. Shows the migration paths according to this reconstruction, and SI in the appendix shows heat maps in the posterior distribution of the location of the relevant node. Augmented geographic model, we supplemented the data of 419 observed languages with sequence-free imputations in order to consider all 562 languages listed as narrow Bantu. And glottal log, the reconstructed migration routes are shown in Figure 3, and detailed heat maps with the posterior distribution for each relevant node are shown. The locations of root and the main nodes remain similar to those obtained in previous analysis. This allows us to conclude that the sampling bias is not driving our inferred history. For our augmented tree is shown in dataset SS3. Again, inferred history, again, this is putative. If you don't walk away learning anything from this channel, you go learn that word, putative. At least walk away from that. Walk away from this knowing that. So this is the proposed route that they give here of the Bantu's spreading. All right, so let's go down. It says in the following discussion, we will rely on the tree built in part 2 and the migration maps built in part 3. This selection allows us for using the most precise family tree built exclusively from available linguistic and geographic data, as well as least the bias migrations maps, including the location and broad groupings of the languages with missing lexical data. This is done in a consistent way, given the procedures followed to build the augmented tree. Discussion. First of all, our analysis consistently showed the region of the Guinea Gulf around the border between current Nigeria and Cameroon to be the homeland of Bantu expansion. This is aligned with a host of archaeological and linguistic evidence, as well as previous phylogeographic reconstructions. The inception of the Bantu expansion from this homeland is inferred to be at 5,110 BP, again in agreement with previous ethnographic, linguistic, and genetic scholarship. Our analysis, however, reveals substantial differences in the topology of the inferred tree. Beyond minor disagreements and low-level groupings, 3 major discrepancies were found. First, other inferred Bantu trees contain a central backbone from which languages gradually split into small groups. Instead, we find those clades result from large and relatively fast diversification event, 3,890 BP. Second, our results show that the central western branch of the Bantu tree, which encompasses 15% of all Bantu languages, including major ones such as Lingala, is not monophyletic, as previously believed. Finally, we find that the B10 to B30 languages traditionally classified as Northwestern belong to the West Coastal branch in our classification. This is consistent with the recent suggestion based on phonological similarities. Crucially, the dating and the geographic placement of the internal nodes of our tree strongly support the fourth hypothesis considered above, that Bantu peoples did travel through the Central African rainforest during the expansion. To start with, our analysis decidedly consisted with a late split. The East Bantu branch split from the rest of the tree around 3150 BP or 2630 BP, if we consider only clade 1623. The proposed calibration point at 2500 BP, which stands in stark contrast from what would be expected under the early hot split hypothesis, is 4000 to 5000 BP, which I actually lean towards 2500 BP because, as we read earlier, archaeological sites show that the slash and burn techniques show that. And then we start seeing the slag from the actual iron furnaces, as we covered in prior shows. We already know that, D-Red. But anyway, from the iron smelting furnaces start popping up around that time too. Let's go back to it because I just clicked off of it. Where is it? Oh, here we go. It says, we then evaluated the geographic localization of the major split dividing languages within and far south and east from the rainforest. More concretely, we evaluate whether the Bantu expansions traveled through the rainforest directly or whether it adopted a coastal route. Instead, by comparing the relative concentration of the posterior distribution of the node in each of those regions. When comparing an interior versus a coastal route, we obtain Bayes factor equal 25.4, 31.7, depending on the exact definition of the regions, thus lending strong support to the interior pathway. Finally, in order to distinguish the last two hypotheses, expansion through the Sangha River interval versus through the rainforest, we compare the dates of the first internal split of narrow Bantu languages. The reconstructed age of crossing the rainforest is 3,890. Although there's evidence of climate changes generating intercalary savannas as early as 4,000 BP in the region that will become the Sangha River interval. Our results are significantly earlier than the complete opening of the Sangha River interval, circa 2,500 BP. Therefore, only the rainforest route hypothesis is supported by our analysis. Rainforest route hypothesis. Our combined phylogeographic model reveals an early and interior route of dispersal of the Bantu peoples through Central Africa. This implies that Bantu-speaking groups expanded through the Central African rainforest, consistent with Kliman's proposal. Our findings shed light on a substantial number of archaeological sites along the Sangha River interval dating around 2400 BP, which attest to pearl millet farming, already domesticated 4000 BP in the Sahel region. So I want to just highlight this here again. We don't start seeing the archaeological sites much later than when they proposed it started. So 2400 BP is a timestamp that we know happened because we have the material culture there, like the iron slags, like the remains that you find from farming populations. We find that there. So we know that occurred 2400 BP. And significant ironworking. This evidence has been interpreted as supporting the late split Sangha River interval hypothesis, which I have established not to be supported by our analysis, because the people that wrote this paper, they're with the late analysis. But again, all the empirical evidence supports the late split, not the early split. So anyway, moreover, forest recovery witnesses a decline in millet farming in the late Iron Age and the dominance of oil palm dominating farming that fits more comfortably within denser canopies. It is also worth pointing out that existing methods for determining changes in tropical forest type rather than their extent remain coarse. Suggestions that pearl millet arrived in Central Africa as part of a multi-cropping package of palm oil, yams, and cowpea imply a potential complex process of assimilation mosaic land used rather than fully fledged open cultivation. Nevertheless, currently definitive archaeological evidence for pre-2500 BP occupation of the interior of Central Africa is almost non-existent, and this remains a hypothesis. I hope you guys are listening. You ain't falling asleep in my class yet. I hope not. We're only an hour in. Let me just put this in the chat. This is honest. This is what I tell you. If you're watching, this is what honest scholarship looks like. Right? So, right here, as you can see, nevertheless, currently definitive archaeological evidence for pre-2500 BP occupation of the interior of Central Africa is almost non-existent. This remains a hypothesis. Our puzzling aspect of our results that should be explored further is the diversion in the direction of migration after Node 4, commencing around the position of Clade 14, Figure 3. After the eastward migration inside the rainforest reached the African Great Lakes region. There followed a backward migration to the southwestern branch, Clades 12 and 13, in a southwesterly direction. This about turn in the direction of migration in the savanna after the part of the rainforest is striking. Further studies, for example, implementing differential travel coasts along rivers could give us further insights into this issue. Conclusion. Our phylogeographic models recover the historical relationships between Bantu languages and indirectly populations with state-of-the-art precision. More importantly, these models allow us to address one of the most long-standing puzzles in recent history of sub-Saharan Africa, as we find decisive support for an early migration through the interior of the Central African rainforest around 44 years before present. This appears to add to the growing evidence that tropical rainforests must not necessarily present a barrier for the expansion of agricultural populations. The current lack of traces of intensive agricultural practice in the Central African rainforest route might suggest Bantu-speaking populations adopted a flexible substantive mode. So they don't have any proof for agriculture during these earlier periods. And again, we just read before 2500, you really don't have nothing in Central Africa. So they're saying, oh, they must have been hunter-gatherers. There's really no proof there, right? It said this could have been facilitated by local ecological changes triggered by humans, as those widely attested in the human niche construction literature. Although much remains to be learned in relation to the associated cultural adaptations, the potential consequences of our findings extend well beyond the Bantu-affiliated migrations, as we challenge the notion that agricultural expansion are entirely determined by assumed ecological conditions for the cultivation and exploitation of specific crops. So that's the entire article right there, right? I would like to thank the scientists that was a part of this research and actually publishing their findings. You know, how honest these guys are with the work. But I just wanted you guys to get familiar with, you know, we're going to start reading more and more secular papers. I want you guys to get familiar with the language, how they write this stuff, and how the scientists are honest with their work, as we saw several times. I want to show you guys, let me bring up my book again, because this is a channel for education. I want to show you guys what that Bayesian, because we kept reading the Bayesian method. So let's talk about that real quick before we wrap this up in a nice little bow, so you guys can enjoy. Anyway, let me go to my science shelf and let me pull, where is it? Let me find this book real quick. And I got a book that breaks down what the Bayesian method means. I think it's this one, Genomes, Evolution, and Culture, Rain J. Haria. Or maybe my evolutionary genetics book. Let me check that one out real quick. And again, I want you guys to really, you know, you take away what putative is. We know what parsimonious explanation means. It's the best explanation based on evidence available. So we know that. Let me see if I can find this real quick, so you guys will be familiar with this terminology. All right. And while I do that, let me let my brothers in real quick. If they want to join, they can join, give some commentary about the Bantu expansion. And I also want to note this too, because language has always been like a staple argument on the Bantu expansion, as we just read, and that's where they get these long dates from. This is one thing, you know, we have to understand. Languages can be adopted. You know, languages are not like genetics, right? You can only inherit it through sex. Languages, you know, just like a lot like it's a part of culture. Culture can be absorbed and adopted. We talk about a lot with J1P58. They're not originally Afro-Asiatic, but as they move southwards towards the Levant, where Afro-Asiatic speakers were, and they begin to mingle and they begin to reduce populations and admix with populations, and the women there, they're taking the local women, having children, and the women are always going to be the first teachers of the children. They pass down their language, they pass down their culture. And within a few generations, you see a philo-linguistic shift in the people, right? So, Ivry, what is your stance on the article and tonight's show and Bantu expansion at large?
My stance is that you people that are Bantus have always been in West Africa, and this paper illustrates it. Y'all originate in the Nigerian Cameroonian area, and then you migrated over into East Africa. Be proud of your Hamite heritage. But
Yes,
no,
yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. No, go ahead, brother.
but no, it would seem like that I guess you can use the term proto Niger Congo or proto Bantu people would have migrated from the north somewhere in northern Africa southward, or even from East Africa southward and westward. And it doesn't really make sense that Bantu people or Niger Congo people would have originated in West Central Africa, specifically in Cameroon and Nigeria, simply because of the fact that there really is no ancient samples of E1B1A or the specific Yoruban genes, autosomal genes. What's interesting about that paper that came out dealing with um, the Cameroonian remains is the fact that, of course, they had A and B markers, but they didn't even have Yoruba specific autosomal DNA. They had hunter-gatherer Paleo-African DNA. So not only is Yoruba autosomal DNA not there, the Y-DNA haplogroup E1B1A isn't there either. And that's just more evidence that how can they originate there when they're not there from 8 to 3,000 years?
Exactly. I'm gonna bring that paper up here in a minute, but I'm trying to look for my book. There's a great definition in breaking down Bayesian, but you're absolutely correct. I didn't mean to cut your bill, but what you think about this part of the paper here? I'll read it to you. It says, nevertheless, currently definitive archaeological evidence for pre-2500 BP occupation of the interior of Central Africa is almost non-existent, and this remains a hypothesis.
Ooh, that's very interesting. So basically, in a nutshell, it's saying that they don't see our genome there. They just haven't found it. They don't see it there.
They don't see They don't see no evidence of archaeology there. Period. Before that period. But they saying that this stuff took place before 2500 BP, but we don't see anybody doing any movement or anything like that, right?
Right, which is fascinating. So it looks like we were pretty much absent, but all of a sudden we popped up there 3,000 years ago from somewhere else.
Exactly. with the ability to perform the highest level of metallurgy, which is iron metallurgy, with Southwest Asian crops, with the ability to cultivate crops. Like, these things are alien to like James Herrera said, many of the material culture of the Bantu was alien and foreign to the hunter-gatherers of sub-Saharan Africa.
And that's another thing, because it seems like sub-Saharan Africa was relatively peaceful. Like the Pygmies and the Khoisanes, they're not really warlike peoples. They don't really have like weapons or anything other than hunting weapons. But it seems like it was relatively peaceful until these Bantu people show up really out of nowhere. It's very reminiscent of the Yamnaya expansion into Europe when they were fighting against those people that were also hunter-gatherers. No, farmers.
Say the clades, G2A and I.
Yeah, G2A and R, and yeah, G getting chopped up by R markers, and I markers also getting beat up too. But it's very reminiscent of that. I think using the Aryan invasion of India and the Yamnaya invasion of Europe is exactly what happened with the Bantu expansion. There's the people from a completely different location coming in to a new location that's relatively peaceful, and then you begin to see war and stuff, which is another reason why it makes no sense for Bantu people to have always been in sub-Saharan Africa, because what would make them all of a sudden just go on an expansion like that into a place that they're technically already supposed to be in? Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't know how Bantu's being separated from everybody has the same technology of everybody outside of that region. I just don't understand that from those that have the landlocked hypothesis, you know. But we got my brother Moore in the building. What's going on? Okay, we'll
Holding
wait.
it down at Berean TV.
Okay, so Moore not here right now. Sean, my brother Sean in the building. What's happening?
I'm back. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's good, fam?
Yeah.
Yeah, gang is everywhere, you know what I'm saying? You ain't never there.
So well, what do you think about the Bantu expansion and whatnot in the full scope of the studies about it?
I gotta catch up on the one that you're covering right now, specifically when you're covering, because I can't see the one that you covered.
I can give you a brief summation of what happened. So in the paper, they give multiple hypotheses that have been proposed for the Bantu expansion. And in the paper, they also admit that the Bantu expansion is based on the Bayesian method and the idea that Bantu languages arose 5,000 years ago. And since Bantu languages arose 5,000 years ago, that must be the starting point of the Bantu expansion. They also admit that this is also putative and it's a hypothesis. And they also admit that there, like you see on the screen, the quote on the screen, is that there's no definitive archaeological evidence for pre-2500 BP occupation of the interior Central Africa. So, like I said, I lean towards there not being no Bantu people there because you don't see archaeological evidence of them being there.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot for them to still figure out in terms of like the migration and the peopling of certain parts of Africa. Like, so for instance, like for the part like in Central Africa, for instance, it seems to me like. So I was talking to Dana Marnici Reynolds once about the concept of like who, if there were converts in of Judaism in West Africa, who did the converting and whatnot. And so the way she was breaking it down, she's like, if there were people who, if there were converts, they were converted by other Afro-Asiatic people who would have connected to the Soninke, Songhais, the guys, the Gawa people. And she was saying that they would have come in to Central Africa and settled that area, coming right out of the Babylonian captivity, whatnot, right? So I almost see that very similar to what you read, what's on the screen and whatnot, right? So I mean, in Central Africa was at the bottom of like Central Africa's got a very interesting like archaeological and geographical history to it and whatnot, right? Particularly when you understand like the big lake that was at the center part of Africa, right? Like that affected migration for a long period of time, right? And when it dried up, it affected migration for a long period of time. Like people might not want to live in a dry, you know what I'm saying, lake bed area type stuff. You know what I'm saying? So people are you're gonna find people where it's more hospitable to live, etc. Right? But yeah, like people really got long story short is people got to understand that this EM2 isolation myth in West Africa, and when and how the migrations are assumed to have happened are just that. Like my man's saying, is based upon assumptions that aren't necessarily panning out. It's one thing to speculate based upon information you do have. It's another thing to speculate off information you don't have. And people need to understand the difference.
Right. I also, at the end of this, I also said, even if the language did start at 5,000 BP, that doesn't mean the expansion has to. Why does that have to be a causal, relationship there? You can easily adopt languages. People can easily move to an area and adopt a language. So even if that is true, that doesn't automatically make everything else true to that extent. But let me get you, Sean. Are you there, Sean? I guess Sean's sleeping. Man. Avery, don't give Sean advice no more, brother.
Hey, the man needs to sleep.
All right, so while we're waiting on him, I want you guys to know, because you're going to hear us read this a lot, the Bayesian method. What is the Bayesian method? What is that talking about? So I got a book called The Introduction to Molecular Anthropology, and it explains it pretty well here and gives the origin of what that means. And we did read that tonight, the Bayesian method that they use for determining or predicting or whatever language you want to use there, the language. I mean, the date of the language arising, the Bantu language. So here on page 158, it says another alternative is the Bayesian analysis, named for the Reverend Thomas Bayes, who was both a Presbyterian minister and a mathematician and published exactly one work in each field during his lifetime. So a lot of people don't understand a lot of our advancement in science and stuff like that comes from European Christians. You know, I know a lot of atheists don't know that. Like a lot of the advancements of science come from European Christians, and to this day we still invoke their work. Like the tectonics comes from a European Christian. This comes from a European Christian. Of course, everybody knows Galileo and his works. But anyway, it says the accomplishments for which he is most noted, namely the Bayes theorem, was published in 1763, 2 years after his death, by an admirer from notes that Bayes had left. Bayes' theorem essentially provides a way to calculate the probability of an event from an assessment of the prior probability of the event happening, along with additional information based on the data we have obtained. So anytime you see the Bayesian method, this is dealing with probability. And why is this important to bring out? Because again, when people read scientific paper that's pretty much built on inference and built off putative knowledge, they teach it as if it's definitive. Probabilities are not definitive. You know, in the old adage, you guys probably heard this before too. Scientists don't believe, they know. No, they don't. No, they do not. And hence this method right here. And no, I'm not demonizing the method because we have to use this method. We have to speculate and try to build models, hypothesize as well, and try to, come to the best conclusion we can with the available data we have. So you're not demonizing it, but we're teaching this because people don't have an understanding of this, especially in this community, especially in the quote unquote conscious community, Black Hebrew Israelite Afrocentric community. Right? It says here, the basic idea is that we should use all the information at hand, both what we have good reason to believe or already know, i.e. the prior probability. Plus we have learned by gathering additional data. In estimating the probability of an event, this is then called the posterior probability. This approach seems eminently reasonable, and indeed Bayesian analysis has been called mathematics on top of common sense. For those of you not already familiar with this approach, Marx 11.1 provides an example. So that's what the Bayesian method. So every time you see that in scientific literature, that's what it denotes in that regard. So, Avery, any comments? Anybody more?
My only comment is when you bring up a text on the screen, just make sure it's big enough for grandma to read. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, my bad. Hold on. You need me to pull it back up? Hold on.
Yeah, because that was mad small for the people.
My bad.
You be bringing out. You bring out. So I love what you do because you shorthand this for the people and get them right to where they need to go and so they got to be able to see this. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Let me see. Let me see if I can increase this. Oh, you know what? Let me do it within the app. Display options. All right, zoom. Let's go 200%.
Oh, that's perfect for grandma and them. That's what's up.
My bad, man. I'm looking at two screens right now, so it looks different on my end. Where was I? Page 158. Now I gotta. You messed me up, man. Now I gotta go back because it's too big. All right, there you go. 158. That's what I thought. Boom. right, cool. I see what's going on. More. It's so big it won't slide over. There we go. So again, let me read it again. Let me just go over it real quick again. So again, the Bayesian analysis, named from the Reverend Thomas Bayes, who was a Presbyterian minister and a mathematician, and published exactly one work in each field during his lifetime. The accomplishment for which he is most noted, namely the Bayes theorem, which is still being used today, as we read tonight. That was the method used to determine the age of the Bantu expansion and Bantu language group. Was published in 1763, 2 years after his death, by an admirer from notes that Bayes had left. Bayes' theorem essentially provides a way to calculate the probability of an event from an assessment of the prior probability of the event happening, along with additional information based on the data we have obtained. So, in other words, when you use this analysis, it's a probability. That's what it is. It's a probability. It's not definitive. It's not something. It's not something set in stone. It's not concrete. It's not, empirical. It's something they using different factors and saying, hey, this probably could have happened. Now that's a lot different than the way how pundits on the internet try to pose these arguments. It's a lot different because they throw it in your face like, we know it happened. No, you don't.
Tail.
And that's why you see a lot of people like not really having counter arguments for what we bring to them, fam, because they're making their arguments based upon assumptions that they think has solid evidence behind it, but doesn't really have solid evidence behind it, and they're not double checking what their assumptions are.
I'm back, fam.
So, Sean, I don't know if you've seen the show or how much you saw of the show. But if you want to speak on your ideas or your input on the Bantu expansion and archaeology and everything that the full scope of it, brother.
Yeah, basically what we've been saying all this time, we've been, basically telling everyone, that the Bantu expansion would have been when these haplogroup E marker carriers would have came into Western Central Africa. So, basically it's just reverberating what we said, what we've been saying. So, there's really not much to add to it.
Right. So let me finish reading this and then we'll move on. I got another paper. I'm not going to be too long in it. Just going to make a quick point. And I'm not going to be up all night. I got to get back up tomorrow, actually, and go back to work, Sean. So I'm not going to drag you on here all night either. But anyway, it says here after it talks about.
I don't believe none of y'all.
We'll be back tomorrow, but tonight I need to get a good night rest. But the Bayesian analysis, again, anytime you see that, it's talking about a probability. And then it goes on to say the basic idea is that we should use all the information at hand, both what we have good reason to believe. And just like Unc said, scientists don't they don't believe, they know. No, bruh, you don't understand science. You do not understand this field, man. Majority of it is based off parsimony, majority of it. Now, you do have things that are empirical, but not all the science is empirical, right? Majority of science is trying to figure out the unknown. And then you're gonna have to, when you're dealing with stuff that's unknown, you're gonna have to deal with probability. You're gonna have to deal with, inference. You're gonna have to deal with these things. You have to build models, and try to work them out and beat it up and try to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And you constantly add it, like it's gonna say, you constantly add information. You gather information. A lot of you guys, especially in the BHI, you got that bad. You stick on a point, stand on a point for years, and don't budge from it. There's no growth because you're too dogmatic. You're stuck, right? It says here the basic idea is that we should use all the information at hand, both what we have good reason to believe or already know, i.e. the prior probability, plus what we have learned by gathering additional data. Right? So from there, let me go to David Reich's paper. And I also have the African Genome Variation Project. I want to just go in there real quick, touch on a few things, and get out of it. So let me pull up David Wright and his paper on Shumlaka. And then I want to go to African Genome Variation Project and just talk about some Eurasian introgression there and my thoughts and opinions on it. All right. So let me go to Google. David Wright, Shumlaka. African West Foragers. If you guys have been following the channel for a while, you guys should be familiar with this paper by now. And Avery alluded to it earlier, so we're going to read it. So, ancient West African foragers in context of African population history. It says here, our knowledge of ancient human population structures, and let me blow it up. More got me conscious about that now. Let me make sure. Okay, cool. Our knowledge of ancient human population structures in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly prior to the event of food production, remains limited. Here we report genome-wide DNA data from 4 children, 2 of whom were buried approximately 8,000 years ago and 3,000 years ago, from Shumlaka, Cameroon. Remember, Cameroon is the hot spot because that's where they're saying this Bantu expansion started from. Which, again, I believe in the Bantu expansion, but the particulars is where I differ, right? This is one of the earliest known archaeological sites within the probable homeland of the Bantu language group. One individual carried the deeply divergent Y chromosome haplogroup A00. Shout out to Rob Bourne because he's A00, which today is found almost exclusively in the same region. However, the genome-wide ancestry profiles of all 4 individuals are most similar to those of present-day hunter-gatherers from Western Central Africa, which implies that populations in Western Cameroon today, as well as speakers of Bantu languages from across the continent, are not descended substantially from the population represented by these 4 people. We infer an Africa-wide phylogeny that features widespread admixture, and the 3 prominent radiations include one that gave rise to at least 4 major lineages deep in the history of modern humans. So, but between this period 8 to 3,000 years ago, that's a long time span. And remember, they put the Bantu expansion, 3 of the 4 hypotheses put the Bantu expansion about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. Here's the problem: DNA evidence is not bearing that out because the actual DNA samples we found in Cameroon have nothing to do with most of sub-Saharan Africa that have E1B1A. Well, none of them actually, right? Because again, it says are not descended substantially from the population represented by these 4 people. So from there, let me go to the African Genome Variation Project, which was done in 2014. This paper pretty much confirms that it was done in 2020. So in the African genome population, it talks about the Eurasian influence in sub-Saharan African populations like the Wolof, the Mandinka, the Jola, the Fula, right? And also the Yoruba and Igbo. Even they had it, right? So we're going to go to the segment of this paper. Let me pull it up here in a minute. I'm trying to go straight to the meat and potatoes. And then I will pull up the supplementary paper and go straight to the point I want to bring out. And then I got some bonus content for you guys tonight that stayed through this, didn't fall asleep in class. I got something to show y'all. I think y'all be intrigued. Let's see. We found evidence historically. Quantification with the greatest in East Africa. Central West Africa, old admixture. Watch this. So let me share this one now. So just remember this paper here because this was done in 2014 here. by Guarasani et al. And others. So it says here, let's go down. It talks about population admixtures in sub-Saharan African. And as you can see, the Wolof, Mandinka, Najola, and Fula all have Eurasian signals of admixture dating about 3 to 6,500 years ago, 53 to 8,100 years ago here. I believe this is the Igbo here. It says, we found evidence of historically complex and regionally distinct admixture with multiple hunter-gatherer and Eurasian populations across sub-Saharan Africa. Specifically, ancient Eurasian admixture was observed in Central West African populations. The Yoruba, 7,500 to 10,500 years ago. Old admixture among Ethiopian populations, 2,400 to 3,200 years ago, consistent with reports. So how are these Africans getting this admixture? And again, the Reich paper is showing proof that the original inhabitants of Central Western Africa, like Sri Lanka, there were no E1B1A people there. And they got Eurasian admixture that's very old. How did they get this? Maybe because they came from Eurasia. Anybody ever thought about that? Let's just keep reading. It says, in more recent complex admixture in some East African populations from approximately 150 to 1,500 years ago. Our finding of ancient Eurasian admixture corroborates finding a non-zero Neanderthal ancestry in Yoruba. So a lot of people will be like, the Africans don't have Neanderthal DNA. Actually, they do. And that shows that they have Eurasian admixture as well, which is where it says here, which is likely to have been introduced through Eurasian admixture and back migration, possibly facilitated by greening of the Sahara desert during this period. So again, the evidence is in the genes. My hypothesis is that they gained this old Eurasian DNA while their forefathers or the antecedents were outside of sub-Saharan Africa. Then they gained the hunter-gatherer admixture, right, which makes up most of our genome today, the descendants of the Yoruba and Igbos or whatnot, and West Africans. Once we came into sub-Saharan Africa and started mixing with these people. That's my take on it. So with that, let me go to the supplementary methods. Let's open that up.
Yeah, that's a really good paper.
Mm-hmm. Let me blow it up, man. You know, my brother Morgan was right. Let me make sure the people at home can read it.
Shout out to grandma.
So there's a segment in this paper, I believe it's up here in the index, that talks about where is that? Long range, estimated Eurasian ancestry among the AGVP populations, page 62. So let's go there. And I want the portion they talk about the Igbo and discuss the Igbo gene. Then we're gonna move to the bonus content. I got something for y'all.
Bonus content.
Bonus content, man. So in this paper right here, exploring admixture among African populations in sub-Saharan Africa. It talks about the Fula. Right here it says, here we discuss novel findings of extensive hunter-gatherer and Eurasian admixture across East, West, South Africa, with evidence for complex admixture in many regions. We find previously undetected hunter-gatherer admixture dating to approximately 300 generations ago in West Africa, as well as evidence for Eurasian admixture among Yoruba dating to the same period consistent with previous findings in Neanderthal ancestry among Yoruba. We suggest the presence of hunter-gatherer populations predating Bantu settlements in this region. Again, what Wright say? The people that we found in Sumlak and Cameroon are not ancestral to the Bantu people. Where are all the Bantu skeletal remains if we were always there? Where are they? We didn't find any. We find novel evidence for recent admixture among several other populations in West Africa, including the Fula, the Gunbe, and Jola. Additionally, we substantiate findings of complex Eurasian admixture dating to 100 generations ago in East Africa. We also show first evidence for complex Hunter-Gatherer admixtures from South African Bantu populations, which corresponds to the period of reciprocal Bantu gene flow into co-located Kansan populations. All right, so now I want to go to the Igbo. I've showed this chart before, and the blue dots is Eurasian admixture and where they date it to 300 generations times 29, and that'll get your number there. The Yoruba is about 200, with around that range, 200 generations. This is very old Eurasian admixture. This explains why somebody like the brother, I showed this book yesterday, I'm trying to think of his name, Remy Yona. This explains why he has a small percentage of Middle Eastern DNA, because Igbo and Yoruba people have in their autosomes that little bit of remnant of Eurasian admixture, showing that these people are around Eurasian peoples in times past. It's the only way you can be around Eurasian people. You gotta be, like I just said, in close proximity. So where were these people in times past? How do they pick up these genes? Only two ways this could go. One way you say is that originally the ancestors of the Yoruba and Igbo were closer to these Eurasian people, or you're going to have to argue and say Eurasian people actually traveled to where the Yoruba and Igbo were in Western Central Africa. I don't see it no other way. How the hell do you get these old admixtures within these people? And then also you see the Fula, the Gagambi, the Jola, and the Wolof also having those signatures. Here we go. Ancient hunter-gatherer admixture in Igbo. Our analysis confirmed hunter-gatherer ancestry among Igbo on the F3 test with consistently negative F3 scores, even when using very different references hunter-gatherer populations. This finding is of historical relevance as it may provide important insights into the prehistory of Africa in this region. In order to examine possible sources of ancestry in Igbo, we first examine relative amplitudes, carrying out all their analysis with one reference test using different population sets. Although we found that amplitudes were highest for Eurasian population references followed by Khoisan populations, the standard errors around the amplitudes were large with marked overlap between different populations, making it difficult to unravel the sources of ancestry among Igbo. So basically, they know Eurasian ancestry is there, they just don't know the direct source. We carried out testing with multiple references, populations, and assessed different possible combinations of admixed populations using Mulder. As outlined previously, we don't see clear evidence for hunter-gatherer admixture among Igbo and Mulder analysis. They show different analysis here. So this is the Mulder one here. And then they're going to show you the other one down here. So I want to get to the portion here where it discusses this. It says here, the highest amplitude for LD decay was produced by the combination of the Kigalagadi and Sardinian reference populations dating to approximately 300 generations ago. Kigalagadi is a South African Bantu population with approximately 34% hunter-gatherer admixture. This finding may reflect several events, including admixing of ancestral Eurasian Bantu and or hunter-gatherer populations. So they can see the genes of ancestral Eurasians, Bantu, comma right there, Bantu and or hunter-gatherer populations. However, the Eurasian event was low confidence. Given the ambiguity of ancestral mixing populations of Igbo, and to improve resolution and assess admixture, we carried out imputation into the data set. Separately, they combine high confidence sets obtained from both. All right, so I'm going to go down. I'm not going to read through all this. I want to get to the portion where it talks about the original inhabitants of Western Africa. And here's that other test right here. Let me go down. Right here. This is the point I want to make right here. It says, although our analysis suggests that modern-day Khoisan population may be the closest representatives to the admixed hunter-gatherer ancestry Igbo, there is no historical evidence of Khoisan-like population existing in this region within the last 10,000 years. But guess what? Now we do have We have the specimens. We have the DNA. We have the bodies now because in 2020, David Wright published the Schumacher burials. And within those Schumacher burials, you have the A00. You have these A markers there. These are obviously, would cluster closer to the Sun people, right? Now watch this. It says, moreover, there is no evidence of click consonants in languages in this region. However, the historical evidence is incomplete. Like much of sub-Saharan Africa, we still don't know. We're in the dark on, right? Because there's no written historical evidence prior to the Islamic expansion. It says archaeological evidence from the burials at Gobaro in southwestern Chad suggests the presence of distinct hunter-gatherer population in this region during the mid-Holocene period when conditions with human and foraging conditions were optimal for survival. These graves suggest the presence of a hunter-gatherer population with distinct morphological features, including tall stature, not typical of present-day pygmy populations in Central Africa. Archaeological findings of distinct rock art are also consistent with the presence of such populations in Central Western Africa prior to the Bantu settlement. So what is this paper saying? Early on, Western Central Africa was inundated with San-related people, not Bantu-related people. This is why in 2020, David Wright published his paper where it showed emphatically that the original inhabitants of Cameroon would have been A and B markers, not E markers. That doesn't happen until the Bantu expansion, until that time. It says this archaeological evidence dates to the Neolithic period. Collectively, this genetic and archaeological evidence suggests that hunter-gatherer populations may have inhabited western parts of Africa, as well as eastern and southern Africa 10,000 years ago. There you have it. This would the Suns would have ruled that sun-like populations would have ruled those regions prior to the advent of the Bantu expansion. All right, so we're gonna go from there, and then go straight to the bonus. Now, Tally, the Eurasian admixture, let me go back to the paper. The Eurasian admixture for the Yoruba is between 7,000 and 10,000 years ago, I believe. Very, very old Eurasian signals in the Yoruba. Let me go back to the chart. The model results. So 200 generations times 29. Let me get my calculator. We read in the paper what they estimated this to be. So 29 times 200. 5,800 years, give or take, right? And then the Igbo is at 300 generations. So we're going to do 300 times 29. That's a generation time is 29 years. 8,700 years for the Igbo, according to this one here. And then the Jola is at 252. And the Wolof, so around 7,000 for this one. And there's also one dated to 3,000 years for the Fula, Dami, and Jola, and Wolof. See if I can find that one. If not, I'll just drop the reference in the chat or in the description later if I don't find it here. That's the Mulder analysis. But I put this in the presentation recently, about a month ago. If I don't find it, it's cool. Let me pull up my PowerPoint. I know I got the images there real quick. Just bear with me, brother or sister. I'm sorry if I'm. Just bear with me. So let me pull my PowerPoint up. I'll stroll through this all night trying to find it. It's 129 pages. And then I'll address this. Let me see if there's any more questions. Eurasian gene flow. Here it is. I'm thinking I used this data in this right here. Yep, here it is. So, oh no, it's not in here. know I quoted it. Let me see. If I can't find it, it's all good.
You trying to look for how old it is
Yeah,
for the Yoruba?
all of them, I guess. All the web.
Go back to the paper. It says it in the paper from 10,000 to 7,000
Yeah,
years
that's for
ago.
the Yoruba, but also right here it says we also found evidence for complex Eurasian admixture in the Fula with an older event approximately 100 generations. So let me just hard search that. Then I'm gonna move on. The Fula, mentioned 25 times. Let me get to it. And the main paper said it too. So I think I read this already. Let me go back. Oh, y'all see it. All right. So cool. So it says we find novel evidence for recent admixture among several other populations in West Africa, including Fula, Gadombe, and Jola. Additionally, we substantiate findings of complex. Oh no, that's East Africa. Hold on. Let me get the one about the Fula. Here it is talking about the 6,500 to 10,000 years ago, about the old Eurasian ancestry in West Africa, dating between those periods. We go down 300 generations. Blasey. When I drop the paper in here, y'all can comb through it too. Right here, we also have more recent. Yeah, this is it right here. Recent admixture in Eurasian admixture in West Africa. We also see more recent evidence of admixture among the Ghanaian and the Gambian populations, Fula, Jola, Wolof, and Mandinka. This is consistent with a large variation proportion of individual non-Sub-Saharan African ancestry observed among these populations on admixture. These findings also substantiate. Also, real quick about that is because, like, especially some of these, like the Fulani have like T markers amongst them, right? And the Wolof as well. They have R markers and stuff like that amongst them. These people are non-Sub-Saharan peoples. It also says these findings are also substantiated by highly negative F3 statistics for Fula and Wolof. We also find evidence for complex Eurasian admixture in Fula with an older event 100 generations. You times it by 29, that'll give you 2,900 years ago, right? And a more recent event about 10 generations ago. That's 290 years ago. Consistent with the nomadic nature of these people, populations, and extensive migration of these groups during this period. So hopefully that answers your question. I'm also going to do you a solid, and let me just post this in the chat so you guys can have that as reference. Boom. All right, so let's go to the bonus content, man. I know my brother Sean over there snoring. Let me go here. So when we go to ancient DNA origins.com and the brother what's his name from Boom Church is supposedly showing his results tonight at 10. But anyway.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So let's go to ancient origins, ancient DNA origins again. Let's revisit that. But this time we got a twist. You ready, Avery?
Let's get started.
You see what that says?
Oh, Ptolemaic.
Oh, the Ptolemaic plot twist.
You took this one.
So
The Grecian Egyptians.
The Grecian Egyptians. Hold on now. E1B1B. And the mitochondrial M1 for this particular person here, Neoph. And they dating this about 2,500 years, so 500 BCE, right? And we go down, look at the admixture here. 26% Scandinavian. 20% Yamnaya, 18% European Bell Beaker, 15% Stone Age African, 11% Mesolithic and Neolithic East Asian, early Bronze Age Albion and Alba 5%, Atlantic Celtic Middle Late 5%. So Egypt was pretty much very much so admixed during this time. But also look at this, 15% Stone Age African. And actually, when I go to my thing, how do I get out of this? Let me go back.
Kind of interesting that Egyptian didn't have any Middle Eastern DNA. It had only European and African.
Right.
But no Middle Eastern.
When I go to my results, I actually get pings on this one because of that Stone Age African.
Mm-hmm.
So the Ozier person, I get pings with Adam. I get pings with Saeed, Wadatif, Neof, which we just saw, Amahar, and Amenophis. I think that's how you say it. And then my genetic similarity to the culture to the left, I'm 13% similar to Ozier and 87% dissimilar to him. And of course, my average genetic similarity to Ptolemaic Egyptian is 100%. According to this, I don't know how you get 100%. You could have put like a little sliver right there because I do share some autosomes with them because it's sub-Saharan African autosomes. All right. Anyway,
that's pretty interesting.
So if y'all want to get pings and you got Stone Age Africa, you might want to get the Egyptian one.
Yeah.
So let's look at some more, man, for fun right here. So let's go to my results, view the stories. Oh, you know what? Hold on. Before we do that, let's go to my results, and then let's go to view population-wide results. Russia. Look, you see the me right there? Because I do got some similarity there, right? 13%.
Right.
Look, the Chechens 67%, which makes sense, right? Siberia 52%, Russia 51%. Dang, pretty much a lot of hits in Russia. Look at that.
So this is confirming when you have a match somewhere, you link up it all. It has a me column, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's confirmed. You only get the me column if you match. 13% is me. And dang, look, Dagestan, that's J. A lot of J right there, ain't it? Dagestan?
100%. Yeah, Dagestan.
Got that Khabib Nurmagomedov. How do you say his name?
Who?
Khabib Nurmagomedov, whatever his name is, like the UFC fighter from Dagestan.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know me.
He's like one of the illest. Like he was one of the illest UFC fighters in his weight class or whatnot. He was a wrestler or whatnot. They couldn't know it. Like he was a beast.
Man, Russia and Caucasus got more in common with ancient Egypt than Shaka.
You just don't know. Let me show you the path so your future can look bright. Help you walk into the light. Help you see yourself. I've heard them say that we wasn't even there. Baby, let me make it clear. We were.
Can't believe he even made that song sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, Shaka Amos, you need to like every homie of yours that did not tell you that was a wax song. You need to kick out of your life, man.
Oh. Anyway, so look, you can see it's very high on Asia Central, and then the Balkans. Let's see where they at. Look, Greece, of course, Greece is gonna be high during this time, right? Bulgaria, Croatia, Romanian, and Hungary. Italy. Spain, Albania. Spain is very 40-some%. Let's see about Arabia. Yemen Jew, Saudi Arabia. Hey, your boy was saying that these columns applied to him. He thought that these columns applied to him, man. Middle East is Syria, 48, Israel, 46%. Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, Israel, Bedouin, 45. So y'all can see Iran, 48%. Africa, Egypt, of course, Tunisia, Algeria, Mozambique, blah, blah, blah. Y'all see Libyan Jew, very close autosomally. These people in Turkey are very close autosomally, man. So if we go with the autosomal argument, then we have to concede that we have very little to do with these places. Tell you go with the autosomal, you have nothing to do with these ancient people, man. If you want to go strictly off of what they call Stone Age African. Anyway, let's look at some
I wish
samples.
they had more than just Ptolemaic.
I know, right? Let's go to view stories on ancient people. They probably got it in the works, man. This dude's gonna milk this community out of all their money. Probably like that's gonna be the, on the game. Like you buy the game, they got the expansion pack, they got the DLC.
Mm-hmm. God of War Ragnarok.
I'm not knocking the business model, man. So this is a Dom, about 2673. What's that? 6th century BC, and of course haplogroup J. Let's look at this autosomal admixture. 0% Stone Age, 30% Yamnaya, 27% European Bell Beaker, 23% Scandinavia, and 9% Atlantic Celtic Middle Late. All right, let's go back, look at another one here, and get ready to end. A Menophis, M1 and CT. And it's 24% Scandinavian and 19%. There you go, Ivry.
That's Egyptian.
Yeah, 19% Stone Age African and 22% Canaan Anatolian.
Yeah, that person was very mixed with European, Middle Eastern, and Sub-Saharan African.
Yeah. 12% European Bell Beaker.
Yeah, it was very mixed.
Get another one here. Emahar, 2,500 years ago. There you go. E1B1B. Yeah. And let's look at autosomal. So Scandinavian, 24%, 19% Canaan and Anatolia, 17% Stone Age Africans, 15% Yamnaya, 13% European Bell Beaker, Mesolithic, and Neolithic East Asians, 11%.
I wonder how he has East Asian.
All the people coming to Egypt during that time. Look at that.
Sure, we know Asians in Egypt.
But you do know Asians in Africa because of Madagascar.
Yeah, I can give you that.
Yeah, let's see how Stone Age African that haplogroup J is right quick.
25% Scandinavia, 23% Yamnaya, European Bell Beaker is 21%, 11% Stone Age African.
You're muffled.
You can't hear me?
All right, now that's better.
So it doesn't say it has 0 Stone Age African because it's haplogroup J. It says it's got 11% autosomal of Stone Age African because that's how autosomal DNA works.
Yeah, exactly. It shows who your foreparents mix with to make you. But it's just so silly how those guys think, man. All right, so let's go back. Let's go to Boston.
No, brother. This is just endless genealogies.
That's gonna be the next one, huh? M1A.
It already is, bro.
Oh no, we was just on Brand dealing with that, fam. Like we jumped off Brand and got on here after dealing with that.
Let's look at this sister's admixture. Scandinavian 26%, Canaan Anatolia 25%.
That's a lot.
And then 21% Stone Age African.
That person could have had basically a grandparent that was full-blooded Stone Age African, and full-blooded Canaan/Anatolian and Scandinavian.
It could have been full-blooded Tayu. Tayu's gonna be 20% Scandinavian, 80% Stone Age African.
Hey, did you run into haplogroup G yet in this whole joint?
No.
Nope.
I looked at it earlier. I didn't see G. Hati is another M1, which is a known Middle Eastern female haplogroup.
African/Middle Eastern.
Canaan and Anatolia, 25%. Scandinavia, 25%. 21% Stone Age African. Mesolithic, Neolithic, East Asians, 14%. Yamnaya, 8%. European Bell Beakers, 7%.
Yeah, everybody's mixed. Nobody's 100% nothing.
Except Tayu, they're 100% Israelite. There's nothing you can tell them to convince them otherwise. Canaan and Anatolia, 25%. Scandinavia, 24%. And 21% Stone Age African. Mesolithic and Neolithic East Asians, 14%. Yamnaya, 8%. European Bell Beakers, 7%. Dang, I'm losing track. Where was I? I think I'm on Camille. Camille lived 2,400 years ago, and it's a female too, U6. 27% Scandinavian, 24% Canaan and Anatolian, 21%. So all the females are floating around at 21% Stone Age African. And then Mesolithic, Neolithic, East Asian, 14%, Yamnaya, 8%, European Bell Beakers, 6%. Neof. E1B1A, got another Yap brother in the building. And he is 26% Scandinavian, 20% Yamnaya, European Bell Beakers, 18%, 50% Stone Age African, Mesolithic and Neolithic East Asian, 11%, Early Bronze Age Albion and Alba, 5%, Atlantic Celtic Middle Late, 5%. Nor. This is more recent, 2,000 years ago. This is another Yap brother. And he is 25% Canaan and Anatolian, 24% Scandinavian, 22% Stone Age African, Mesolithic, Neolithic, East Asian, 14%, Yamnaya, 8%, European Bell Beaker, 7%. Ozir, this is the one I matched with. It's about 2,650 years ago, and it's a J. I matched with a J marker, y'all. And it's actually 30% Yamnaya, European Bell Beaker, 27%, Scandinavian, 23%, and 9% Atlantic Celtic Middle Late, Early Bronze Age Albion Alba, 6%, Mesolithic, Neolithic East Asian, 4%. Oh, it says 0% Stone Age. So why the hell did it say I connected with him? It said 13%. Oh, let me go back. So we stopped at Ozir. So when I go to my results, and it says here genetic similarities to Ptolemaic Egyptians. It says I'm 13% similar to Ozir, but he has 0% Stone Age African. So what is that based off of? Anyway, let's go back. Rakaya is about 500 BC as well. 28% Scandinavian, 24% Canaan Anatolian, 20% Stone Age African. Is this a woman or yes, woman? Just use 6. So all the women on here pretty much all have Stone Age African. Yamnaya 7%, European Bell Beaker. And Saeed, 2,500 years ago, is a J marker. Oh, 7% Stone Age African. Yamnaya, 26%. European Bell Beaker, 24%. Scandinavian, 24%. Atlantic Middle Age, 8%. Stone Age African, 7%. Mesolithic, Neolithic East Asian, 6%. Early Bronze Age Albino Alba, 5%. Saleha is another female. So I want to bet, yep, 20%. So all the females around that percentile on this page, man. With the highest being Scandinavian. Da-da-da-da. They call this Ptolemaic, but this will be before. No, it says the Greek was. Egypt was ruled by Wahiri Psamtik, the first known by the Greeks. Okay, yeah, this is before the Greeks because the Greeks don't come into power to 331 BCE. And this is a J haplogroup here, 28% Scandinavian, Canaan, Anatolia, 24%, 20% Stone Age African. Then the last one, Sanahar, around the same period. It's another J marker. And it's 20% Stone Age African, Scandinavian. So if y'all want to get one that actually matches with your autosome, get the Egyptian one. So that's the last one. And again, for the brothers that are wondering about how your test is going to look, when you go to population-wide results, and you do match one of the samples or any one of the samples, you will get a me column. And according to genetic similarity, I'm 13% compared to the ancient sample, which they say is the, which one was it again? Ozier at 13%. Anyway, that's that. Ivory, any last comments on ancient DNA origins?
No, it looks like you said, the best one to get for African Americans would be the Egyptian one because that's the one seems like will match. But as for the Israelite, it doesn't seem like we can match that unless you're mixed. Like if you have a Jewish father or mother or grandparent, you might get some Israelite. But other than that, it doesn't seem like you'll get Israelite. You'll more than likely get Egyptian, which makes sense because of things like Ramses the Third and all that. So,
More, what about you?
I think the most important thing to understand is this site is set up the exact same way that Teo would have it set up based upon their autosomal model. And so understanding that, like, just understand, like, again, it's talking about there's literally almost zero. And this is what I don't like. So again, if Dante was to take this test, Dante is more sub-Saharan African than Yeshub is. Yeshub came out at 80% on this thing, right? Dante is close to 90%, right? So if he took this test, Dante, we know for a fact, has a downward clade, a close downward clade of the E1B1 that we find at with the Natufians and whatnot, right? Because that turned into E1B1B, and then that turned into his EM84, etc. Right? And so, even if he took this test, right, and took the Judah test like Yeshub did the other night or whatnot, he would come up with 0% Israelite and like the 99% sub-Saharan African, most likely, or the Stone Age African, most likely, right? Because he's even more autosomally West African and sub-Saharan African than Yeshub is. So I just want people to keep that in mind, because this is why autosomal DNA is not good for tracking your paternal lineage or maternal lineage over millennia and whatnot, because it only goes back 500 years, some say 1,000 years, right? So that's the most important thing to understand is, like, again, this site is set up the same based on the model that the Teo twins are talking about. And again, nobody with the majority of West African DNA is going to get the hits they're looking for in the Levant. And what's funny about that is if they actually included the haplogroups and whatnot, you should get some sort of like maybe trace connection to the Levant, right? Like so again, Yeshub is EU290, right? Dante is EM84. they should both get some minuscule connection to the Levant, right? So even in Jed match, Dante, again, he's mostly West African, but he even comes up at least 3% Natufian, a little under 3% Natufian, right? It would have made sense to me if there was like at least a trace amount, a point something percent amount connection, being that they both have E. If you go to My True Ancestry, whatnot, right? They would have if the site used the same methodology that My True Ancestry used, and I don't even like that website. But if this website used the same methodology that My True Ancestry used, you would have shown some connection. It would have shown you some kind of connection to the E1B1, etc. If you have haplogroup, if you're E1B1A or E1B1B, because it would give you some basic match. It will match up as close as possible to the ancient DNA that they have, right? So, for instance, they did the same thing in their Iberian samples, right? So there's an E1B1 sample that literally like everyone that has E basically matches up to the Iberian Moorish whatever samples they have in My True Ancestry because of how generic the E1B1 is, right? So because the E1B1 is so generic, it should have given you some kind of hits if you're haplogroup E, right? Even if it's at, like I said, a minuscule amount, but we don't. So we know it completely excludes haplogroup the same way that the Teotons would have their model do, right? So again, this is their geneticist that they're saying is proving us wrong, right? Literally shooting their whole model in the face with a scholastic shotgun.
You need to have a GIF that has somebody cocking their shotgun.
But yeah, I'll let my plane there because that just is what it is, man.
Right, that's it, man. Well said. New Hope says, do they have a link to the entire data set for the Israelites on the site? Seems to be that the data set bias based on putative data is based off the remains that were found.
Canaanite.
Yeah, even before the Canaanites.
They go back being older.
Remember, Canaanites had. My bad. Go ahead.
I said they go back being older than Abraham. He got his grandchildren, great grandchildren being older than him on the site, man.
Right, and a lot of those samples that they were using, some are Natufian and some are Canaanites. And keep in mind, I don't know if we've covered this on the channel, but the Canaanites, their genome basically would be Southern Caucasus, Armenian, and Zagros Iranian. You're definitely not going to connect to Canaanites because they were basically Eurasian, and we're not Eurasian. So yeah, I'll do a video breaking down the Canaanites and stuff in the future.
I don't know how he said that whole sentence and did not mention the Horians at all.
I was tempted, but I didn't want to spoil my future presentation.
All right, I think my brother Sean's asleep, man, so I'm gonna let him rest.
I'm still here. Yeah, but basically, everything the brothers just said is really nothing to add to it. You're not going to get what you're looking for, So it's a fun tool if you want to play around with it and spend all your money, like a slot machine, So
it sure would be like gambling.
Yeah, you got so many different I guess not kits, but different tools to play with. Yeah, to buy and different products to buy. So hey, listen, like Yeshua says, it's a good business model.
You need to get like a Northern Kingdom, Southern Kingdom kit. You know what I'm saying? Like group them together. You know.
I did the math. You're gonna spend if you just buy them outright, you don't get the platinum plan or whatever it's called. You're gonna spend about $900.
Hey. You might as well get the big Y.
The big Y for real. You can get 2 kits of big Y for that.
There's better websites with more comprehensive data than what we like you said. My True Ancestry did a better job, but it is what it is, man. They want to, he was smart. I can't hate on him. He's smart. The way he did it was smart. Break it up into little bitty packages. He knows people are, enamored with the history of the Israelites. So you're gonna get people that claim they Israel to buy the packages. You're gonna get people that don't claim that they Israel because they want to know more about, you know, ancient Israel. He's smart. He gonna clean up well off that website.
Low key though, I can't lie. It does feel like false advertisement. Talking about tribe of Judah, tribe of Levi, tribe of Issachar. We don't have no Israelite remains like that. Like,
Well,
and they coming at us like we're trying to act like that's our argument, that we're trying to say, we're trying to prove that, like, yo, your man's is literally charging you to look at some stuff that's fraudulent like that. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. I'm like, bro.
Yeah, the level of cap is amazing, bro. Like, it's like unsurpassed. It's like cap is a superpower with these cats. You know what I'm saying?
Even Polite taking notes.
Polite.
He's like, I ain't scammed this hard in a long time. Anyway, let's get out of here, y'all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, real quick. He really want to get out of here, man. Nah, son, let's go through another video, man. I want to break down our plan.
Well, I'm good. Good night.
We out of here, man. Much love to the audience, man. I hope y'all learned something. Y'all walked away knowing more than you did before. Coming to the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Yeah, man, we trying to promote education here. That is the goal. We're trying to promote education. We out.
You to give you a true knowledge of yourself and life. Man in the full knowledge of himself is a superb and supreme creature of creation. When man becomes possessor of the knowledge of himself, he becomes master of his environment.
I don't feel pain anymore. Guess what, baby? I feel free. Nothing hurts me anymore. Guess what, baby? I feel free.
I'm so complete in the mode.
Guess what, baby? I feel free. And you know damn well,
he lit me up every time that I fail. It set me free.
You should quit your job to this.
Hold up, let them politic. Ooh, one day they hate you, next day they love you. I'm still young and fuck. I can never trust me. I feel free. I feel free. I feel free.
I don't feel pain anymore. Guess what, babe? I am free. Yeah, nothing hurts me anymore. Guess what, babe? I am free. Yeah. Feel I'm out of my past life. Died and came back twice. Now I'm free. I don't feel pain anymore. Guess what, babe? I am free.